An epic road trip spanning 21 days, traversing over 4 countries, 9 jeeps, 15 friends. But what makes a road trip epic? Sure, there will be breathtaking scenic drives, beautiful backdrops, amazing food, and even some drama. But it is always the people that ultimately defines the quality of the times spent together. So come journey with us as we share the sights and sounds of our trip, a trip that will forever be etched into our memories. While the preparation and planning for our trip had started some 9 months prior, it all really began at a petrol station in Kulai, Malaysia. This man, whom we affectionately call Lao Ta, or Big Brother, is the man who worked tirelessly to get our itinerary meticulously planned out, hotels, meals and flights arranged, paperwork to cross 4 different borders, spare parts for our jeeps in case of emergency repairs, and a mountain of other administration to make our journey smooth and without hiccups. The first leg of our drive was to the town of Ipoh, some 500 kilometers away. This first drive together allowed us to understand each other's driving styles, get familiar with our convoy SOP, and how we receive instructions and communicate over the radio. We were able to react well as a convoy to the different road conditions, be it overtaking other slower vehicles or staying together in traffic. After a full day of driving, we reached our hotel in Ipoh in the evening and proceeded to reward ourselves with a well-deserved meal for a great start to our trip. The next morning, we made a straight dash to the border between Malaysia and Thailand to preempt any unexpected delays we might encounter while clearing customs. Even then, we managed to enjoy the scenic drive along Malaysia's northern roads, something we don't get to do very often. We were rewarded with a beautiful sky, low-hanging clouds, and amazing views of the lush green landscapes. Clearing the Malaysian side of the border was a breeze, as they were used to managing Singapore-registered cars. There was just a little queue, and we were through. The Thailand side, however, was a bit of a hit and miss. All the paperwork had to be done manually, and the procedures were inconsistent depending on which counter your vehicle ended up at. Nevertheless, we navigated the process patiently and finally found ourselves in Thailand. Now would be a good time to introduce the jeeps and the amazing people with them. Our next stop was a very special meeting with a couple of car transporters. They would be transporting our jeeps over the next 2 days to Chiang Rai in northern Thailand, while we took an aeroplane there. The reason for doing this is to keep us fresh and conserve our energy for the drive in China. It would have taken us 3 days to drive the 1,700 kilometers. However, with each transporter having 2 drivers, they could essentially drive non-stop and arrive in Chiang Rai in 2 days instead. And so, with our hearts full of separation anxiety and our air tags activated, we bade a temporary farewell to our jeeps. We spent the night without our jeeps in Hat Yai, a bustling city of many sights and sounds. The night bazaar near our hotel was filled with delicious snacks to keep us happy the whole night. Hat Yai is also a city where getting around was easy with the many tuk-tuks around. We had dinner at a huge buffet place with all the seafood and meats you could ever eat, and even treated ourselves to some beers since we were not going to be driving the next day. We ended the night drinking bird's nest, a dessert drink rumored to be very good for your complexion if you want baby soft skin. The next morning, we took a flight to Chiang Rai, transiting through Bangkok. We arrived safely, except that some of us were delayed by immigration as we looked younger than our passport photos due to drinking too many bowls of bird's nests. After settling into our hotel, we had a delicious lunch filled with the familiar taste of Thai spices and lemongrass. The rest of the night was then spent exploring the city of Chiang Rai. We had some time the next morning before our jeeps arrived and went to expend some energy at a shooting range. The highlight of the day had to be seeing our transporters with our jeeps rolling down the dusty road. 2 days apart, and we were finally reunited with our rides. It was almost getting dark by the time we finished taking over our jeeps, but we still wanted to stretch our legs by visiting a nearby tea plantation for some snaps with the sunset. And now that you've met our jeeps, it's time to put faces to the jeepers. The next day was going to be a long and tough drive. We first had to cross the Thai-Laos border and then drive another 200 kilometers across rough roads to reach the northern border between Laos and China. The Thai border crossing was smooth, and an interesting part was when we switched roads to now drive on the right side. It was surreal when we crossed the Thai-Laos Friendship Bridge. The feeling was amazing, as after almost a whole year of planning and preparation, we were finally actually on the bridge, entering Laos. The next part was tough. We had to clear some 200 over kilometers to reach the northern border of Laos in a town called Botan. The roads were unpaved, rocky, dusty, and crowded with big trucks and lorries. Several jeeps were even considering suspension upgrades once they returned home. It was an interesting drive to say the least, and it took us over 5 hours to reach Botan, a shiny cowboy town that sprung up in the middle of nowhere. Early next morning, we were the first in line to cross the Laos border into China. The process was smooth, and we got through without any trouble, except for a little hiccup with a malfunctioned key. We think the driver learned his lesson. All was well, and we even had a shower of blessing as we passed through. We also met up with our Chinese guides, who will be with us for the rest of the trip. This is Kang. He too owns a Jeep Wrangler, or as the locals call it, Mu Ma Ren. Kang will prove to be an excellent guide, navigating for us, keeping us safe and on track, helping with our field repairs, and basically covering every technical aspect of our drive. Xiao Long was the woman behind all the administration. She handled all the bookings with the hotels, restaurants, and places of interest, and also managed the paperwork at the various inspection checkpoints. The two of them had been amazing, and many things on this trip would not have been possible without their efforts. Our first stop was to the traffic police office to get our temporary Chinese driving licenses and number plates. We had to undergo a quick lesson in local road safety, which was easy to understand, for most of us anyway. We left a little memento at the police station to mark this trip. Today was also the day we earned the right to paste the flags of the 5 countries we had travelled through on our jeeps. And with that, we had officially driven from Singapore to China. We had dinner at the Chama ancient city in Pu'er and soaked in the vibrant culture of song and dance. We were amazed at the level of energy of the locals who participated enthusiastically and even came dressed for the occasion. Some of us were so lifted by the mood that they decided to join in the celebrations too. This being where the world-famous Pu'er tea originates, there were no shortages of tea houses and free tastings. Of course, no night market is complete without their local snacks, some of which might not be to our taste, or what a great start to the China segment. The next morning, we took a lovely stroll along a little stream with a water wheel to the village of Na Keli. Na Keli was an important stop along the ancient Chinese T-Horse Road, or Cha Ma Lu. The T-Horse Road is a tough ancient trade route traversing through the mountainous areas of southwest China, which connects today's Yunnan, Sichuan, and Xizang together. Na Keli was a crucial stop sitting on this route, where nearly every long-distance caravan had to pass through. The village today is kept largely pristine and is one of the few remaining cultural landmarks of ancient China. We then headed north for over 400 kilometers along the river valley to Dali. This was also our first experience of driving long distances over Chinese highways, and we must say that the roads were very well maintained and pleasant to drive on.
我站在天子脚下，被踩得喘不过气，走在前门大街跟人潮，总会奔去。或许我根本不属于这里，早就该离去，才能给我致命的一击。请用力到这里是梦想的中心，但梦想的遥不可及。这里是圆梦的圣地，但却总是扑朔迷离。多少人敌不过残酷的现实，从此销声匿迹。多少人陷入了昏迷，剩下一具空壳尸体。别再问我家乡。
Dinner at Dali was having Yunnan's famous 过桥米线, or cross-the-bridge noodles. Simply put, they served us a bowl of hot piping soup and we put the noodles and ingredients in ourselves. This dish was said to have originated from the story of a scholar who was studying hard for his imperial exams on a small island. His wife, who would bring him food, found that by the time she had crossed the bridge to the island, the soup would have turned cold and the noodles soggy. So she basically decided to keep the noodles separate from the soup, just like our food delivery in Singapore, where they also separate the soup and the noodles too. Spent the rest of the evening exploring the ancient city in Dali. Our trip was planned in such a way that each day's drive ended with enough time for us to have the opportunity to relax and explore the area where we were staying at. Kudos again to our Lao Da's planning. It must also be mentioned that most of the hotels we stayed in were very nice, giving us a good night's rest before the next day's drive again. The next morning, we did a bit of sightseeing at the Three Pagodas, a famous landmark in Dali. We then drove to Erhai, the second largest highland lake in China. Instead of highways, today we had to navigate through narrow alleyways to reach the lake. There, the drone pilots had a bit of fun flying with some seagulls. All in all, we had a relaxing time around the lake, enjoying the scenery. Lunch was a delicious dish of cai huo ji, or firewood chicken. As the name suggests, it was cooked with firewood, making the meat very flavorful. The afternoon was spent on another scenic drive along the famous Nujiang or Nu River to arrive at the town of Lushui. It is not every day that you get to drive along the Nujiang River Gorge. The meandering road, following the path of the ever-flowing river, embraced by tall mountains all around us. Truly a surreal experience. We detoured from the valley and drove up to Zhizhiluo, an interesting town high up in the mountains. It was once a bustling political and cultural hub, but fears of a great landslide forced the residents to flee and relocate elsewhere. The landslide never happened, but not all the residents returned, and Zhizhiluo became known as Yunnan's mountaintop ghost town. We continued on our journey and started ascending into the mountains to get to our next destination. The roads were windy, with rock walls on one side and steep cliffs on the other. The danger of falling rocks and landslides were very real, and we navigated carefully but swiftly past them. We were also impressed that the roads were constantly repaired and the debris removed after these rockfalls and landslides. Not an easy task, to say the least. As we got higher, we soon got used to driving in these conditions and were also rewarded with breathtaking scenery of neighboring mountains. The landscape around us gradually changed, and to everyone's delight, when we reached about 3,000 meters in elevation, we found ourselves driving with snow all around us. This was definitely a first for our Singapore cars to experience driving in snow. We descended over the other side of the mountain and ended another amazing day. Arriving at Dulongjiang, another magnificent gorge, we took a slow, scenic drive that morning, soaking in the beautiful wonders of nature.
徘徊着的，在路上的，你要走吗 ？Via Via， 易碎的，骄傲着，那也曾是我的模样。沸腾着的，不安着的，你要去哪 ？Via Via， 谜样的，沉着的，故事你真的在听吗？我曾经跨过山和大海，也穿过人山人海。我曾经拥有着的一切，转眼都飘散如烟。我曾经失落失望失掉所有方向，直到看见平凡才是唯一的答案。我曾经毁了我的一切，只想永远的离开。我曾经堕入无边黑暗，想挣扎无法自拔。我曾经像你像他像那野草野花，绝望着渴望着，也哭也笑的平凡着。我曾经跨过山和大海，也穿过人山人海。我曾经问遍整个世界，从来没得到答案。我不过像你像他像那野草野花，冥冥中这是我唯一要走的路啊。时间无言如此这般，明天已在一夜一夜，风吹过的路沿远，你的故事讲到了哪？
Dulongjiang is home to the Dulongzu, one of China's officially recognized ethnic groups. What makes this group particularly fascinating is the now forbidden tradition of tattooing the women's faces. It was believed that doing so prevents their young women from being kidnapped by other tribes, as they would be easily recognizable. Only a handful of these women are still alive today, and we were thrilled to be able to meet and speak with two of them. On the way back, we saw a spot beside the river and decided to have a little picnic to enjoy the awesome scenery. We opened up our camping chairs and tables and set up shop. Some of us also drove into the shallow portions of the riverbank for a bit of wet driving. But Slim Doll decided to have too much fun and ended up deeper than he would have liked. Took a while, but with some guidance over the radio, he was able to recover without much trouble. It is, after all, a jeep. After our little picnic, we continued on our drive up the mountain to our next destination. Unfortunately, we had to stop due to a breakdown. Remember this guy? Well, he began losing power along the way, and we had to try and figure out what was wrong. After some level 1 diagnostics and video consultation with our experts from our workshop back home in Singapore, it was determined that some water had gotten in where it was not supposed to. We applied a temporary quick fix and luckily managed to continue on our journey without further breakdowns. The plan was to get out of these mountain passes, get to a town where we could then find a proper workshop with a better solution. The unintended stop threw our timing off, and we had to drive in the dark to our hotel. No worries. That's why we have light bars. Our destination the next day was a 200 kilometers drive to a town called Deqing. It was going to be the highest hotel we would be staying in on our trip. But more of that later. We took a slight detour in the morning to visit the Yunnan-Tibet border. Unfortunately, we did not get to see the border sign as it was recently torn down. We did, however, manage to water the plants in that area, did our 3-point turns, and continued on our journey. Of course, the drive brought us through more breathtaking scenery and amazing landscapes. We also stopped along the official road sign of the famous national highway G219, known also as the Xinjiang-Tibet Highway, which we had been travelling on. This scenic and beautiful highway spans over 2,000 kilometers and is one of the highest in the world. It hugs the western borders of China with her neighbours, and we were thankful for the many epic drives it had given us so far. We continued on our journey and were amazed at how our landscapes could change so drastically in the course of a day. From lush green river valleys, to arid rocky canyons, to snow-covered ridges. This amazing drive finally brought us to our rest stop for the day at an elevation of 3,455 meters, the town of Deqing. We settled down to a sumptuous steamboat dinner, perfect for the temperature outside. Deqing has a heavy Tibetan influence and is also home to the Feilai Temple, built in 1614, some 400 years ago. The main beauty of Deqing lies in its view of the majestic Meili Xueshan, a mountain range rising close to 6,800 meters above sea level. The highest peak, Kawagabo, is the highest mountain in Yunnan and is considered sacred to Tibetan Buddhists. Several of us got up early the next morning to try and catch the sunrise falling onto the peak. Alas, it remained hidden behind the clouds, but still treated us to a magical view of the mountains. As we departed from Dechin, we made a quick pit stop at a local workshop where we had earlier made arrangements to flush any remaining contaminants from Slimdor. The amazing thing was that Akang managed to get original Mopar gear oil delivered to this remote workshop in under 24 hours, another testament to his abilities. All's well that ends well, and Slimdor is all good to continue the rest of the trip. After driving for a while, we made another stop, this time a coffee break for the humans. We stopped at the Jinsa River Bend, an interesting creation of nature where the river made a huge hairpin bend in order to go around the mountain. The scenery was beautiful, the weather was perfect, and we even felt patriotic enough to unfurl our Singapore flag for a photo. We continued down the valley towards our next destination, a magical place originating from the legends of the mythical Shangri-La, a place called Pala Kerchong. The next morning was going to be the most epic drive of the whole trip. For the first time, the owners of the land had granted us permission to drive our jeeps through the canyons up the mountain to the famous Shambhala Stupa, or Pho Ta. We would also be passing the 1,300-year-old Pala village. The route would take us winding 108 turns up the canyon through snow-covered landscapes. It was a truly magical drive. At the top, we took snowmobile rides while enjoying the majestic view of the Shambhala Stupa, or Pho Ta, a natural mountain that resembled the shape of a stupa. But wait. Did you notice that only 8 jeeps came up the mountain? Yes, unfortunately, Red Baron's coolant reservoir tank cracked and sprung a leak on the way up. In the interest of time, we took the decision to leave her jeep there, and a few of us will come back down later to repair it during our lunch break at Bala village. Again, credit must be given to Lao Da, who knew which parts are more likely to break down and so brought the correct spares. The repair was smooth, and we were able to change to a new tank and also topped up the fluids. It was also Lao Da who wanted to prank Kay, telling her that Red Baron could not be driven for the rest of the trip.
The tow truck will pull her car all the way to Kunming. So to the entire trip, you will all the 5 first already. No choice.
Then I don't get to drive my car.
Yeah, then you drive stick bicycle or you drive my car.
Are you shitting me?
You want to laugh, you laugh lah. I see your face cramp already. Your car is ready now. We settle already. Come, let's go.
With all being well, we continued on our journey with an espresso break on the roadside, heading to our next destination, an interesting homestay in the Shambhala village of Xiangchen. We were apparently the only guests in the entire resort, and our rooms were amazingly furnished and luxurious, perfect for a great night's sleep. The Shambhala village in Xiangchen is part of Sichuan province and has a long Tibetan history. It is nestled in a beautiful and fertile valley, protected and isolated from the outside world. The houses were uniquely painted white and looked like little castles. We took the opportunity to do what jeepers do best when there is nice weather and beautiful scenery: set up camp and have instant noodles with luncheon meat. These are the best moments where we can chill, have great conversations, and basically enjoy the outdoor life. We left Xiangcheng to our next destination, but decided halfway to take a different route. We got off the road and turned into the mountain trails for a bit of off-roading. While the trails themselves were not that challenging, it was the high altitudes that were creating problems for the jeeps. We were traveling at about 4,600 meters in elevation, and that was somehow creating fuel combustion issues, resulting in a loss of power, especially for the 2-liter turbocharged Wranglers. With some perseverance, we still managed to climb higher and were treated to a magnificent view of a lake with endless mountains all around as far as the eye can see. Once again reminding us how vast our world is, and conversely, how small and insignificant we were. We soon arrived in Yating and proceeded for dinner nearby. We had a very special fish dish, which was cooked with steam. The fish was very fresh and the broth was nice and tasty. We will be spending 2 nights here, so it was a good break for all the drivers to recharge. The next day, we visited the Daocheng Yating Nature Reserve. We took a bus, walked, took a tram, and even horseback riding. We can now add these to the list of transportation that we had experienced on this trip. The view in the nature reserve was equally mesmerizing, and since we were not driving, we could take it all in at a more leisurely pace. We left Yating and headed to our next destination, Luguhu. It was again a very scenic drive, and even the view during our toilet break was breathtaking. We had a lovely lunch overlooking the Eya village, said to be more than 500 years old, inhabited by the Nasi ethnic group. The interesting part of our drive that day was definitely the river crossing. Akang managed to find a ferry service across the Shuiluo River, saving us more than 100 kilometers of driving. And with that, we clocked yet another unique mode of transportation in our trip. We have now traveled by air, land, and water. We also had a bit of fun ferrying a few of us across a river basket used by the locals to bring people and animals across the river. We continued our drive, but this time through some pretty rough and dusty terrain. We also had to navigate through a village high up in the mountains with very narrow roads. At some points, we were just mere inches away from the cliff's edge. The road conditions improved as we neared Luguhu, and we finally managed to reach our destination safe and sound. Luguhu is the highest lake in Yunnan, with the middle of the lake forming the border between Yunnan and Sichuan. The lake is mesmerizing with her turquoise waters and the surroundings peaceful and relaxing. It was truly one of the nicest places that we have visited on this trip so far. Our next stop was to Lijiang, one of the bigger cities on our itinerary. But before that, we had a treat for our jeeps. After 16 days of driving in all kinds of road conditions, it was time to give the jeeps a good wash. With our jeeps shiny and looking new again, we proceeded to our dinner place in Lijiang, followed by sightseeing at the huge Lijiang Gucheng. By now we have gotten used to the concept of these ancient cities, which were essentially used as venues for food, drinks, souvenirs, and entertainment. The next morning, we arranged a private tour to visit the magical Yulong Xueshan, or Jade Dragon Snow Mountain. We had to take a train, clocking yet another mode of transport. We finally arrived at Lanyue-gu, or Blue Moon Valley, which got her name obviously from the turquoise color of her waters. The color comes from copper ions from the melting snow and ice originating from the Himalayas. It is also worth mentioning at this time that having a drone on our trip provides a different perspective of the things we saw and adds another dimension to the beauty and majesty of these natural wonders. The next day, we continued on our journey and headed to visit the famous Hu Tiaoxia, or Tiger Leaping Gorge. Legend has it that a tiger jumped across the river at the narrowest point, using the rock in the middle. Whether you believe it or not, the gorge was still a majestic sight to behold. We took to the highway once again, and from here on, we would no longer be driving on mountain passes or valleys anymore. That also means we won't be encountering any more animals along the roads, which there were plenty throughout the trip. We arrived at the city of Shaxi, a little town with one of the nicer ancient cities. It preserved a very traditional charm, attracting a lot of locals coming here to create content for their social media. And so finally, we found ourselves driving our last drive for this trip towards the city of Kunming, where we will hand over our jeeps to be shipped back to Singapore while we take to the skies and fly home. As we come to the end of this journey, we look back, treasuring each memory that we have made and each experience that we have felt. But most importantly, we will hold dearly the amazing bonds that we have forged with our traveling companions. For it was because of these friends that the road trip was truly epic.
这笑容温暖纯真。